What we know is that regret, as you were saying earlier, Seth, is ubiquitous in the human experience. All right. This feeling that we have when we look backward and wish we had done something or wish we had done something differently. That it is one of the most common emotions that human beings have. And it's a very unpleasant emotion. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why does it exist? And it exists because if we treat it right, it's useful.
Hello and welcome to the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And today we're talking about regret, motivation, the science of persuasion, and all things human behavior with the one and only Daniel Pink, one of the most influential business thinkers of our time. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seth. Good to be with you.
It's great to have you. I've been looking forward to this. We have a lot to talk about. I've read all of your books. I keep this one, To Sell is Human. That is you, Daniel H. Pink.
That is me.
But we're going to talk about many of your other books. I just want to thank our audience quickly for coming back. For those first timers, thanks for giving us a shot. We got always great content for you. Like us, love us, comment. Check us out online at thekeynotecurators.com. Dan, 7-time New York Times bestseller. Your work on behavior, decision-making, human potential has shaped how we work, how we sell, and how we lead. One of your more recent books, The Power of Regret, it's quite popular. A lot of people have dialed into it, and it kind of turns, I think, conventional wisdom on its head. And I want to use that as a starting point for our conversation. You know, I know you're a thinker, you're a writer, you're a lover, you're a human behaviorist, you're probably a recovering lawyer, as I understand it. And it might be a conversation that you've had ad nauseum, but regret is ubiquitous. We all have it. And even as a kid, when my brain even wasn't yet formed, Dan, I would hear the phrase, I have no regrets.
Yeah.
And I couldn't articulate it and I couldn't understand it, but there was something like at my DNA core level that irked me. I was like, dude, seriously, like you're a human being. How can you not have any regrets? Right? So let's use that as just like a starting point. How do you frame that up when people say that? What, are they really saying something else, or have they like semantically reconciled and completed with themselves their regrets?
I think it's possible that people who say that have adequately reckoned with their regret. I think that's possible, but I think it's a fraction of people. I think for the majority of people, they've basically been conned. That's why they say it. They've been conned by this philosophy that we have out there that the path to a good life is to be positive all the time, never be negative, to always look forward and never look back. And that advice, which all of us have gotten, is bad advice. It is also unscientific advice. What we know is that regret, as you were saying earlier, Seth, is ubiquitous in the human experience. All right. This feeling that we have when we look backward and wish we had done something or wish we had done something differently. That it is one of the most common emotions that human beings have. And it's a very unpleasant emotion. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why does it exist? And it exists because if we treat it right, it's useful. And so I think what's happening is that the 90% of people we're talking about who say that don't know how to deal with regret. So they feel it. You know, we typically say you should ignore your regrets, put your fingers in your ear, or and when that doesn't work, people wallow in their regret. But instead, what we should be doing is looking at our regrets, examining our regrets, using them as information, using them as data. When we do that, we have a pile of evidence from the last 50 years of social psychology showing it's a transformative emotion.
You know, we've only been talking for a few minutes, but at some point, Dan, I've got to make this about me. My invitation for you on this podcast was in the realm of something I was going to regret. In 2025, I've been doing this podcast for 4 years. And the birth of the podcast, like many, was out of the pandemic. And initially I was like, well, if I don't do it when, and it was kind of an action versus inaction that you talk about in your book. So I did that. I have no regret. And we've sustained it. We're well over 100 episodes. I've grown, I've learned truly. And it's been an amazing vehicle for me in every aspect. And I said to myself in 2025, I said, self, I want this person as a guest, and you were on the list. And then I started talking myself, well, I should reach his publicist first, or this manager is not going to like it, or who am I? He was on Oprah and all this stuff. And I threw the shot out. And as you say in your book, in not these words, but you never make a basket that you don't shoot at. So here we are.
Yeah. I don't say those exact words, but it's true. And one of the things that we see in examining this emotion of regret, which I examined through 3 different ways. Number one is that I did a very large public opinion survey about American attitudes about regret. I collected regrets from people all over the world, about 26,000 regrets. And I also looked at, as I mentioned earlier, several decades of science about it. And one of the things that is true in everywhere you look when you study regret is that over time, people regret what they didn't do way more than what they did do. And so doing so having that bias for action that you were describing, Seth, taking your shot is one of the most powerful ways we can mitigate regret in the future.
It is true. And I think that, there's a lot of, I'm going to kind of make comments, and there's a question in here somewhere. So as the smarter of the 2 people here, help me land the plane. There's bucket lists and there's things that people aspire to. And then they say someday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, but someday is never really on the calendar. Yeah. And, with regrets, goals can be projects. There's a lot of fear involved. You have to speak it into existence. Understand it has a ripple effect, go for these big moonshots. But, I know from reading your book, there's the 4 types of regrets. Help us understand what those are and which one is kind of the most prominent or universal one for our audience here.
Sure. Let me tell you how I got there. So as I mentioned a moment ago, I did something called the World Regret Survey, where I collected regrets from people all over the world. We have this incredible database of regrets from over 26,000 people in 134 countries. It's amazing. We had the survey up in Mandarin, we had it up in Spanish, and obviously we had it up in English. And what I found, exactly as you say, is that around the world, people seem to have these same 4 core regrets. So let me tell you what they are. The first one is what I call foundation regrets. Small decisions you make early in life that accumulate to terrible consequences later in life. So each individual decision isn't necessarily the end. It usually isn't, but they accumulate. So Classic one is, I spent too much and saved too little, and now 20 years later, I'm broke. So that's a foundation regret. Second one, regrets of boldness, which I think is what you were talking about. This is a regret that comes when you're at a juncture in your life. You can play it safe, or you can take the chance. And overwhelmingly, when people don't take the chance, they regret it. Even people who take the chance and it doesn't work, it's a disaster. There's actually less regret from those folks than there is against people who never took the shot at all.
And that's kind of under the action versus inaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one type of action, the action of boldness. But that's a big category. And I think it's interesting about these regrets is that typically the way we think about regrets is we segregate them by domain. This is a career regret. This is a romance regret. This is a financial regret. This is a health regret. And I don't think that's what's going on in how our brains think about regret. I don't think we categorize like that. I think it's more fundamental. So these boldness regrets, which are, if only I'd taken the chance, they can be about work. If only I'd started a business. They can be about travel. If only I'd studied abroad or I'd gone on that trip to that exotic place 20 years ago. They can be about romance. If only I'd asked that person out on a date. So boldness regrets are a very big category. Not the biggest, but very big category. Yeah. Third category, moral regrets. If only I'd done the right thing. You're at a juncture in your life. You could do the right thing. You could do the wrong thing. You could take the high road. You could take the low road. Most of us, most of the time, regret taking the low road because most of us are good people who want to be good people.
Right.
And finally, the biggest category is the fourth one, which is connection regrets, which are regrets about relationships. Not only, romantic relationships, not only our romantic partners, but the whole spectrum of relationships in our lives, from siblings to parents to colleagues to friends. And once again, people describe the same. It's so fascinating. Like all over the world, people describe basically the same architecture of the story. I had this person I was close to or should have been close to, and our relationship came apart. Usually not for dramatic reasons. It's just like a slow drift apart.
Yeah.
I want to reach out, but it's going to be really awkward and they're not going to care. So they wait. Drift goes even more. It's even more awkward. They see the other person's not going to care. And so the regret is if only I'd reached out. And that's a big error because when people do reach out, it's way less awkward than they think. And the other side almost always welcomes the overture.
Yeah. And I mean, who doesn't have that in their life? I mean, if you have a pulse, you have it.
But that's a great point, because that's exactly it. I mean, I like the way that you put that, because who doesn't have that regret
Right.
is really the question. It's like, who has any regrets? It's like, the question is, who doesn't have that particular regret? And I think what's interesting is that myself and other people who look at this material can often locate their own regrets in these categories. And the reason for that, and I think there's something actually powerful about that, is that there is a universality in what we regret. And just to push us a tiny step forward, there's universality in what we value, because regret lets us know what's important to us. When people tell you what they regret the most, they're telling you what they value the most. And so what we value seemingly around the world is a sense of stability, the opportunity to learn and grow and try stuff, being good, and love. And so this emotion that people are saying, oh, no, I don't want to deal with it, actually gives us a window into the human condition.
Yeah. And love, that's what I was present to as you were, distilling this distinction, really, is that, just kind of explaining your research is, Burt Bacharach, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, And I just always try to work Burt Bacharach into every podcast. So
that is usually a strong move in any form of entertainment, no matter what you're doing.
It is. That's what we found. People are just coming to us like ants on candy just because of our Burt Bacharach references.
Although I have a feeling that you had a bet with a friend saying that I'm going to do this interview, and do you think I can get the phrase Burt Bacharach in there?
Right.
And every time I say it, you got to give me $100.
You
so
caught me.
Made like $400.
It's actually up on Barstool Sports. What was the over under? How quickly I could do it. So there it is. But Dan, there's one that I vacillate personally on reconciling. When I was 13, my father went into the hospital and died very suddenly. Cancer of the pancreas, several days. We're talking days. It was far advanced. We didn't know. Yeah. And I went to the hospital a few times. I was 13, and we didn't know how serious it was. And it was it wasn't literally one day to the next, but it felt like that. And my regret is I didn't go enough. I didn't have a goodbye. I didn't have this, and I'm not even talking like Hallmark. My dad was this big, magnanimous, gigantic figure in my life, and still is 45 years later, right? It's a struggle, or it's a challenge, or it's something that's present for me. And look, I wasn't an adult. I couldn't get in a car and drive to the hospital. But, how have you seen people reconcile without turning this into a Freudian couch? Because what I got from the book was, let's be informed by our regrets. And like you said, it's a signal to what we value, right? You reduce the noise. So in today's world, I have some friends that are my age that are in a similar situation. Now, I'm not like overcompensating and going and sleeping in the hospital, but I'm certainly have my radar up and I'm there and active. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of how I'm honoring what I regret, as a matter of fact,
This sounds great to me. I mean, it sounds to me like you're doing it right. So let's unpack. I'm not a Freudian, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not a medical doctor of any kind. I'm just a dude who writes books. But let's unpack this analytically. So one thing that's really important here, Seth, is this. So you and I are talking on a Friday. And so yesterday, Thursday, Seth, you probably made 100 decisions, 150 decisions. It's Friday. I would imagine that 148 of those decisions you do not remember today.
Yeah, probably 149 and a half.
Yeah. So, and yet here you have this decision or this indecision from how long ago was it? You said 45 years ago?
45 years ago, yeah.
45 years ago that you still remember, and it still bugs you.
Yeah.
So that is a very strong signal. And when we have signals that strong, we have to pay attention to them. And so the question is, what is that signal telling you? Okay, so you can't plug your ears on that and say, oh, everything happens for a reason. I always look forward, never look back. That's bad advice.
Right.
What you are getting is a powerful, powerful signal a piece of data. It's a notification on your phone. You have to pay attention to it. So what is it telling you? As I look at it from the outside, what this is telling me is that you value love. You value connection. You value treating people with dignity. And that ends up being something that is integrally important to how you want to live your life. All right. So that's good. You might not know that you might not have known that at a conscious level. You might not have said, if someone says, tell me what you're like, you might not, your first answer might not be, I'm someone who values love and respect and treating people with dignity.
Right.
So, but based on this, you are someone who values love and respect and treating people with dignity.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you do with that? Now, you can do a few things. You can wallow in it and say, oh my God, I'm someone who cares about love, respect, and treating people with dignity, and I messed it up, and I'm such a terrible person. That's a bad idea.
Right.
You've already approached this in a healthy way by scrutinizing the person who made that decision, which was 13-year-old Seth, who's a different person from Seth today. So what you want to do is you want to treat that person, the 13-year-old Seth, with compassion rather than contempt. Treat that person with kindness, right? Treat that person with kindness, all right? You want to extract a lesson from that, which we've already done, and then you want to apply it going forward. So what are you going to? So what are you going to do now? And you've already articulated what you're going to do now. You're more alert to when people are suffering. You're probably more willing to tell people what you like about them, what you love about them, than you might have been without this kind of thing. And so this is a way that this painful emotion can actually help us make progress, can help us live better. And what I don't want people to buy the bullshit philosophy that you should just ignore your regrets. Because the regret that you have right there is not something you should ignore. That is a powerful force in your life for making your life better. Yeah. And so it's a brilliant example of what, I'm talking about in this book, but also what researchers have found all over the world.
It inhabits me, and I'm going to connect the dot here a little bit. The 150 decisions, when something like that happens at that age where you lose a parent, it kind of set the framework a little bit. And, I'm not Pollyanna and rose-colored, but there are very few hills, especially as a parent now, that I die on. You know what I mean? And I can trace it back to that moment, Dan, and really kind of look, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I think something matters more than it isn't, but I can tell you on a whole, my daughter, we're doing long division and she just learned how to ride a bike. And for her age, everybody's riding a bike and she struggles with long division. And I'm kind of like, long division, riding a bike, riding a bike, riding a bike, riding a bike. Now, long division will have its moment, right? But it's kind of like, I'm not dying on this hill of long division and a tutor and Sunday nights struggling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also I can make a pretty safe bet that your daughter will master long division. Maybe not right now, but in 6 months or a year.
If she doesn't.
Let me ask you a question, Seth. When did you master long division? How old were you?
Like last week.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. Do you have any freaking idea when you mastered long division?
I don't. Maybe long division was always like 113, divided by 942. That one
with the remainder.
Yeah, with the remainder. I still struggle with that. 6th, 7th grade, something like
whatever.
that.
But the point of the matter is that I don't think I don't think anyone's life is going to be materially different if they mastered long division at age 9 or versus long division at age 11.
Right. And especially now with your companion Siri, I don't think, where we had a calculator beforehand, for sure. I'm going to throw out a thesis, and it could be completely wrong here. Millennials, not Xers, Ys, Zs, and even younger are looking at the Xers and the boomers and the grind and the sacrifices. Not that sacrifice doesn't happen in every generation. I think they look different. And I wonder, I had a thought about this related to regret and how they're looking at the generations. I'm an Xer, there's my siblings are young boomers. I think the regrets are more visible for millennials and the younger generations. And they're taking lessons from that, where experience and maybe work-life balance are becoming, it's just a thesis, but it was an observation as I was reading your book. How is there something to reconcile there or glom onto?
I'm a little skeptical. Actually, but that's a skeptical about, not a skeptical about your particular claim. I just am a skeptic in general about generational explanations for things. There is in this research, there are two different kinds of ways of thinking about generations. One of them is the cohort effect. So people born in 1968 are similar to each other because they're born in 1968. And so that's the cohort effect. And then the other one is what's basically about time of life. So people who are born in 1968 would be 57 years old right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with, and so is it just that all 57-year-olds are always this way, or is there something about being born in 1968? Right. And to me, the weight of evidence shows it's really about the time of life rather than about what cohort you were born into. That we have different perspectives on our lives at different stages in our life. And we see this in the regret research too, something that you had mentioned, that I think one of the biggest points that you had pulled out very quickly in our conversation, which is inaction versus action. People in their 20s, we have data on this, people in their 20s tend to have equal numbers of regrets of action and inaction. But as they aged, what stuck with them were the regrets of inaction. So people in their 30s had more inaction than action. People in their 40s had more inaction regrets than action regrets. People in their 50s, a huge amount more inaction regrets than action regrets. People in their 60s, way more. And so, that was the big effect. So I'm just, forgive the long-winded answer, I'm just generally skeptical about generational explanations for things. That Gen Xers, as I am, Gen Xers are this, and baby boomers are this, and millennials are this, and blah, 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 blah. I think the evidence is pretty thin that there are major differences.
It was just a thought because, my daughter, I shared with you, is, entering the workforce. One of your sons is as well as your other children. And, I think the iteration in the beginning was a little bit of the beanbag culture and having ping pong tables or, pinball machines to satiate a certain generation or style or type. And, how is that reconciled? But,
but also the other thing that's happening is a lot of workplace philosophies. There's an ebb and flow of them. There's sort of like, it flows between loose and tight. So it's like, everybody plays ping pong and sits on a beanbag and has a nap pod, and then it's like, no, you have to be in the office all time and have a punch card. And they're like, no, that's oppressive. And then we go back to something else and they say, no, that's too weak. And, so there's kind of an ebb and flow about.
Yeah, for sure. And then you can get into input versus output, and counting outbound calls versus what do you produce,
that to me, that's an easier one. Yeah, what we should be doing is, we should be, I think that we have an obsession with measuring, just in general, we're overweighted on measuring input and underweighted on measuring output. Totally. You see this with in education, where basically the central measuring category in education is time. So college is 4 years. It's not how much you learn. It's 4 years.
Right.
High school, it's 4 years, not how much you learn.
Right.
A course is 1 semester, 15 weeks, because we're measuring everything by time rather than by the input of time rather than the output of what people are learning.
In my case, college was 4 years plus. So
good. Whatever.
Whatever. And here I am today. I want to turn the corner a little bit. I am a lifelong salesman, Dan. I know in one of your books, you talk about brooms. I sold home improvements door to door. So I was a tin man.
Yeah.
And I canvassed and I went into the living room and I did the demos and I measured windows and siding and decks and doors and the whole 9 yards. But I had a paper route where I upsold and I shoveled driveways and cut lawns. And, the whole idea of persuasion in your book, you refer to Bob Cialdini and this whole idea. Talk about that a little bit, because I think today with social media and everybody's like this outreach and they're like, I know your pain and let me give you value and let me give you value for free. I'm more of the school at this point in my sales life about provoking a dialogue and provoking a conversation versus I want to persuade you into, what I think it is you need or is going to solve your pain. How do you reconcile that? Or, what are any thoughts you have on that?
I think that it's tough. I'm not sure that's anything new. I don't know if anybody ever wanted to be persuaded. In fact, I think most of us have, we have evidence of this as well, that most of us are kind of resistant to that. People don't like changing their minds. even when they go out and look for things on their own, they're more likely to find things that confirm what they already believe rather than would challenge what they already believe. And I also think it's important to think about that degree of self-service that people can have now is very different from the days of the Tin
Sure.
Man. If people wanted windows or siding, people who want windows or siding now will go. Their first step is going to go online. They're probably not even going to answer the door anymore.
Right.
For that kind
Right.
of thing.
Let
And
alone
so,
let me into the living room for 3 hours.
right, to do a little demo and some measurement and the whole thing. I mean, it's great. It's like, I mean, I have to say, like, that has got to be like one of the greatest young people's experiences you could possibly have. Because if you can do that, you can do anything. And I'm not joking around about that. I think that is like,
I'll tell you, I
Yeah.
draw off that experience. There are moments, and I did it in the Washington, D.C. area, from all the way down Temple Hills out to Bowie, Silver Spring, Columbia, every range, every iteration of home. It was really fascinating.
yeah. I mean, it's a great, I mean, difficult experience, but I think anybody who can handle that can handle just about anything. But getting back to the idea, I don't think people actually ever really want to be persuaded. I don't think we don't like to change our minds. We often resist changing our minds. I do think that people like to be served, and they like their lives to be easier rather than harder. And so if you are able to make people's lives easier rather than harder, then you can be a very, very good persuader. And I just think that takes more skill, a more sophisticated suite of skills than it did in a world where potential buyers had not much information, not many choices, and no way to talk back.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you indulging me. You know, we're going to round it out here. We're coming to the home stretch. I got one more question for you. I just want to, our audience, this is great content. I know this is why you come. Comment where are your regrets in your life happening? Where have you learned from them and how you're applying it in the future? We'd love to hear from you. Our community has done a great job of commenting and sharing. So thanks. Dan, you know, AI, it's all over the place. It's everywhere and anywhere you turn. You can't go upstairs,
Yeah.
downstairs, or sideways and hear about it.
Sure.
A Whole New Mind, one of your books. And when AI and automation were emerging is kind of when it came out, or at least in my mind. You know, how has your outlook on creativity and right brain thinking changed with AI now here fully in a full-blown fashion?
Yeah, thanks for that. So it's a super interesting question. Now, what I did for those of you who, now that book is like 20 years old now, and as so for the 99.8% of you who have no idea what Seth is talking about, let me tell you, this is a book that I wrote 20 years ago, arguing that certain kinds of abilities, certain kinds of metaphorically left-right abilities, logical, linear, sequential, analytic abilities, spreadsheet abilities, were becoming commoditized because of the ability to send them overseas, the ability to automate them, and the fact that people had more sort of a wider, more vast set of needs because of a world of abundance. And so let's go to automation. The automation I was talking about was essentially software that could automate certain kinds of legal work, certain kinds of accounting work, that kind of thing. And my argument is that things that are more inherently creative, things that are more iterative, things that require empathy, inventiveness, big picture thinking, those are going to be more important because those are going to be harder to automate. And I was right, but I was also wrong. Because AI can do some of those creative tasks pretty well. In fact, arguably, AI does creative tasks as well as it does these analytic tasks. And so the question then becomes, as we pull on this string, you know, when AI is doing more, what are humans going to be doing? And I don't know the answer to that, but I have a couple of guesses. One of them is that certainly, and everybody in their brother-in-law has said this, that AI is not going to take your job, but a person using AI is going to take your job. Okay. I mean, that is hackneyed. It's cliched. It's also right.
Yeah.
And so what kind of skills I think that there are skills of curiosity and asking the right question. There are skills of collaboration and working with other people and working with teams is extraordinarily important. I think that the other thing that we often don't talk enough about is taste.
Taste like aesthetic and sensibilities.
Yeah, taste and not only aesthetic, but just like what's good and like, do you know what's good and what's not?
Right.
Okay, you know, and I think that comes from hard-won experience. So I can go and say, I can go to Claude or ChatGPT or whoever and say, here's a newsletter that I've written. Please come up with 35 possible subject lines. And it'll give me 35 subject lines in 31 seconds.
Right.
All right. Now, that's great. That's amazing in a way. Okay. I mean, it is kind of stunning.
Yeah.
Now, but that's only the beginning of it. Because what I have to do is I have to apply my taste and judgment to which of those 35 is going to be best. And you have to be able to know. Some people don't know. They don't know that 33 of those are terrible, that one of them is pretty good. One of them is very good, but if you tweak it this way, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about with taste. That's different from the job of, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to conjure a few good ones. And then I'm going to take what I've conjured and make it a little bit better. And it's a different set of, so I think it's taste and collaboration and curiosity end up being, some of the coins of the realm.
In your book, To Sell is Human, you do talk about asking questions. There's a whole section on that.
Yeah.
And dialogue. And, to your point about taste, one thing I thought of, you're at base camp at Everest and you have all this technology, the altimeter, what the temperature is, the wind, the forecast, GPS. You can measure your own oxygen, where you're at fitness wise and all your VO2 at the moment and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you might even have a Sherpa, but there still needs the human to decide, is it a go or no go to the peak? And so,
I mean, on that one, yes, on that one, there probably is a way to take all of the accumulated decisions that have been made by people in that situation and figure out which of the factors are most important and ask AI that kind of thing. Now, I think there is a human judgment there, which is that if you're going up as a team and it's like, well, actually, Eduardo over here is completely wigging out. The guy is like sweating. He's totally nervous. He's racked with anxiety for being here. And that's going to bring us down. That's a human judgment that the AI is not going to make.
Right. It's very, very interesting. On that note, I think we'll leave it there for everybody to use their judgment on where to go from here. But I'm glad we covered regrets, Burt Bacharach, and summiting Everest all in one fell swoop on a Friday afternoon.
Well done, Seth.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. I love working with you. I love your books. I follow you on social media.
Thanks a lot.
I notice you've had a surge back in lately, as opposed. Is that accurate, or is it?
Yeah, I've been experimenting with a lot. I sort of was neglectful of social media. Didn't pay that much attention to it. I think I'm late to the game, and so I'm experimenting with some ways to get ideas out there in formats that I haven't been using before. Just trying to see what's valuable and what's not.
Sure. Well, what you'll find is that this podcast will just bring rocket fuel to your career. So
fantastic.
You've made it.
Done. I'm done for 2025.
Pretty much. No regrets for 2025. That's it. It's a wrap.
I will just rest on the laurels of this esteemed podcast.
Thank you. But really, thank you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate it so much. And to our listeners, once again, thanks for coming back. Check us out on the KeynoteCurators.com. We appreciate you taking your time to be with us because you're smarter for it. We'll see you next time.